What's happening, everybody? It is Brent Axe. We are live here on the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page, presented live by Krause Health. Following a disaster, I think we need to take Syracuse football to Krause because they just had a rough day at the Carrier Dome, losing to Boston College. A final score at the Carrier Dome, 58-27. The headline on syracuse.com really says it all. Syracuse turned what was statistically and by many measures, even coming in as a 3-point favorite in this game, what would be deemed its most winnable game left on the schedule, and turned it into one of its most embarrassing losses. 58-27, the final. I'm sure you guys have a lot to say in the comments section, so please have at it there. I'll certainly respond to those here shortly. If you are watching this later on YouTube, we do put this on YouTube. Thanks for watching down the road, but just know that we are here live after every Syracuse football game, and we will be here live after every Syracuse basketball game. And that is certainly prevalent because people are going to give up on this football team now, plain and simple. They are 3-6, and simple arithmetic will tell you that Syracuse has 3 games remaining, and if they win those 3 games, they'll finish 6-6. But that is an absurd thought at this point, given the performance of the Syracuse defense today, given the overall performance of the Syracuse team today. There were a few encouraging signs on offense before the bottom fell out. A startling second quarter at the Carrier Dome. The Orange gave up 34 points in the second quarter to go down at halftime 44-20, ultimately losing 58-27. 34 points in a single quarter. You know, the biggest concern surrounding Syracuse football was its offensive line. Well, hey, guess what? The offensive line only gave up 3 sacks today. Tommy DeVito was given, that extra second to throw the football. Actually looked good at times doing that. Syracuse had a couple of drop passes in the end zone. It was the defense that had supposedly been the strength of this team and would keep them in a game like this. Yes, A.J. Dillon would be a challenge. But here's what Boston College did today. First of all, Syracuse gave up a school record in terms of rushing yards. Boston College had 496 yards rushing. That is a new single-game record against Syracuse. The Orange ultimately allowed 691 total yards in this game. That's the 4th most in school history. That is a Boston College school record. It is the 5th worst loss in terms of margin of victory in the Dino Babers era. It is a game where the Eagles set school records for total offense, points in any ACC game, and rushing yards in a conference game. 496. I mean, look, I can list all the records given up here. I can throw the numbers at you here. This was an embarrassing performance for Syracuse. This was a game where Boston College, yes, had A.J. Dillon, and he is an all-world back, and David Bailey, who's a terrific back. It's a 1-2 punch that a lot of teams have a tough time facing. But this was not a game where your starting quarterback went down. This is not a game where something tragic happened. This was a game, Steve Addazio even said it after the game. In the postgame in the postgame television interview. He said, we basically ran the same play 30 times today. This was just a straight-up bruising by Boston College. And it just goes to show you that, you know, the defense was obviously the biggest issue today. But Boston College lost 4 players, 4 starters off their offensive line a year ago. And they're one of the best offensive lines in college football and have one of the best running backs behind it in college football in A.J. Dillon. It just goes to show you that a middle-of-the-pack team in the ACC can have a stellar offensive line like that. So that's just, you know, kind of something to think about here. But this defense put on just a startling, embarrassing performance today, particularly given that you knew what's coming. A.J. Dillon, David Bailey. For Dennis Grossel, Boston College quarterback, this kid's a walk-on. He is at one point like the 6th string quarterback on that roster to come out and deliver some of the plays that he did for Boston College to score deep touchdown passes on this Syracuse defense with the same exact play twice, basically a simple play action. When you've got an All-American safety out there and Andre Sisco, I mean, it is embarrassing in every sense of the word. And I see some of you making the comment in the comments right now, there is no question that some coaching changes have to be put into play here. I think that's unavoidable at this point, especially if this team finishes 3-9. If you go from 10-3 to 3-9, nothing can stay the same. I mean, that is I don't even know what to say about that. That thought is absurd, to say that we're just going to continue on here and keep doing what we're doing. So I think Brian Ward's job is clearly in jeopardy. I think Mike Lynch's job, again, the offense wasn't completely as fault today as the defense, but I think his job is in jeopardy. I think Mike Cavanaugh's job is in jeopardy. Again, the offensive line actually had a pretty decent day, but we're at the point where Dino Babers cannot simply sit back and forge ahead the same way. That would be an unacceptable thing for Syracuse fans at this point. That's what this game did. This game changed that perception, and you had a fan base that came back in droves a year ago. Well, what today showed is they can flee just as quickly as they'll come back. I mean, look, I'll do the live chats here. There's still fans that care about this team. We'll document it, but they're done. There's 3 games left, and it harpens back to that old expression, if a tree falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. It's basketball season in Syracuse, New York now. People are going to put their full attention on that. The holiday season's coming. Whereas last year, the momentum built for Syracuse football from this point. It is a startling fall from grace. It's like that movie Carrie, right? Now, I only saw it a couple of times, but one moment she's like the homecoming queen, and the next moment she's covered in pig's blood. It's like, what happened here, right? To go from 10-3 to potentially 3-9. I mean, who are they going to beat? Not only what I mentioned about people moving on because it's basketball season, they go into a bye week. Like, they're literally not even playing next week. And who's going to notice? That's how bad it is for this football team right now. And some people question, giving Dino Babers that contract extension after last year. I mean, look, if you go back in time, in the moment, he was desired by other schools. You had to shore things up recruiting-wise. Excuse me, because there were other schools that were using that against Syracuse and, fruits of getting a 10-win season. But over the long haul here, you got 4-8, 4-8, and you're rebuilding those first couple of years. 10-3, and what could potentially be 3-9. On the surface, it doesn't look good, so I think a change would do you good. I don't think you fire Dino Babers at this point because it'd just be too much money to buy out. And I understand people are going to ask for change, and I agree with you in a lot of senses. But when you make changes, it makes things unstable. So if you're willing to ride out and willing to be patient what the change brings, you got to remember when you bring in new coaches, they have not coached these guys. They have not recruited these guys. They're coming in, they're assessing, and they have to fix what's broken. That takes time. You've got a defense that's going to lose Alton Robinson, lose Kendall Coleman, lose Lakeem Williams, lose Andrew Armstrong, and a few other players I didn't mention here. So that's going to shift from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball. And the offensive side of the ball, yeah, they'll be a year older, but how much better will that offensive line be next year? I think, people are giving up on DeVito, and there were a few plays that were very frustrating today. The slide before the 4th down, the fumble on the sideline. These are mistakes that young players make, right? But when he had that extra second or even a couple extra seconds, which has been a rare sight to throw the football today, he delivered some dimes. He showed what he can do when he can set his feet, throw the football, and get it out there. But, look, this was all about the pathetic performance of the defense today, the pathetic coaching by its defensive coordinator. It's stunning. Boston College ran a simple game plan. They just came in and flat out ran over this football team. Very discouraging, and I feel bad for the fans that came back, that believed in this thing again, were given good reason to, at least it seemed on the surface. And I'll say this, can we retroactively give Eric Dungey the Heisman Trophy from last season? I can't even remember who won the darn Heisman last year. Oh, it was Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. I can't even remember, who was more important to their team than Eric Dungey was last year. It's amazing what Eric Dungey covered up. It's amazing what Eric Dungey hid. The flaws in this offense a year ago, and there were some better offensive linemen and some personnel players, right, that weren't that aren't a part of this team, that were part of that team. Let's just give him the Heisman. Take away the 2018 Heisman and give it to him because of everything that he put out there last season. It's stunning. It's startling. It's every word you can think of here. And now, how do you fix it? How do you fix it is the question. That becomes the big thing. But to go from 10-3 to 3-9 is just absolutely stunning at this point. Kyler Murray won the Heisman last year. Thank you. I kept thinking Trevor Lawrence did it. I vote for the Heisman. I should remember these things. I had a temporary brain cramp there. Forgive me. It came down to Kyler Murray. Tua was in the mix last year too, and we'll see how it goes this year. Trevor Lawrence certainly not going to win it this year. It's looking more and more like Joe Burrow from LSU is going to take the Heisman. So thank you for reminding me of that. I had a little brain cramp there. But Kyler Murray, I'm sorry. We're going to give the Heisman to Eric Dungey because who was more important to their team last season than he was? Absolutely incredible to think about. All right, let's see what you guys are saying here in the comments. A lot of you making a lot of the same comments here about coaching changes and how they're going to address this. Matt says, from preseason top 25 to the worst team in the Power 5, life comes at you fast. For Syracuse fans, that something else to throw in there, that, yeah, they have not defeated a Power 5 team this year. I mean, just keep adding on. Records being broken. 7 of the 8 worst defensive performances that Syracuse has put up, and this would fit in that category, have all been under the Dino Babers era, the Brian Ward era. To put that name out there, which a lot of you were saying a change needs to be made there. And there's just something missing from this team. I mean, you can look at the numbers, you can look at the scores, you can look at the missed tackles. I mean, the kill shot on this season was delivered at 1:34 p.m. today. That's when this game was out of hand, and you just knew that not only this game was over, but the season was over, right? So let's look back here. When we sat here and talked after the Maryland game, it's 63-20, and we say to ourselves, wait a minute here. Is this an anomaly? Is this early in the season? And Mike Loxley just found something early in the season that Syracuse had not fixed yet, and they had time to fix, or was this who they are? And there were other defensive performances, the NC State game, the Pittsburgh game, where the defense kept them in line. The defense kept Syracuse in the game, handed it over to the offense, and we got so preoccupied, for good reason, with the struggles that the offense had and the offensive line had, and they were the trouble on this team, right? And then we knew that DeVito was hurt, and that's where the focus came. But the leak started again last week, and there were other signs of it. Excuse me. There were other signs of it throughout the season, but against Florida State, and again, the guy everybody knows is getting the football just had his way through that Syracuse defense. It was that times 2 today with both David Bailey and A.J. Dillon. I want to pull up some numbers here on them individually. I mean, we gave you the mark that Boston College's rushing yards today set a new single-season mark against Syracuse. A.J. Dillon had 35 carries for 242 yards. He averaged 6.9 yards a carry. David Bailey, 16 attempts, 184 yards, or 172 yards, pardon me, 10.8 yards per carry. This is a week after you face Cam Akers. You do have good linebackers. You do have a good defensive front. You knew exactly what Boston College was going to do. Yeah, they came out and threw a little bit more than you thought they would, but it's not like Dennis Grosso, a walk-on, I might remind you, lit the world on fire. He's 8 for 10 for 195 yards and 3 touchdowns. But that play-action pass, big plays, Flowers had a couple of those big catches. Touchdown pass included for 50 yards. I mean, just a flat-out embarrassing performance by the defense today. All right, let's go with more of your comments here. Jim saying the DBs are lost. Alton Robinson, not an NFL prospect. Brent Cisco, repeatedly exposed. Alton Robinson is an NFL prospect, Jim. You can say it all you want. That kid's getting drafted. He gets double-teamed a lot. He got pushed off the edge. There was a few tackles. Certainly he missed today, but you're wrong on that. He is an NFL prospect, and Andre Cisco is an NFL prospect and an All-American safety. He did get off his mark a bit today, did not have a good game overall. I'm not going to argue with you there, but Robinson is definitely an NFL prospect. Let's see. Matt saying defense was supposed to be the strength of the team. Time to move on from Ward. Jack saying Babers refuses to take the blame. I don't agree with that, Jack. I think that Dino does take the blame for this. He did say at the press conference they win as a team, they lose as a team. I mean, if you want him to flat out say this is all my fault, if you want him to take more accountability himself, I mean, that's fine. You can ask for that, but I don't think he's deflecting blame. I don't think this is somebody who's pointing the finger elsewhere. I think he puts it squarely on his shoulders. I disagree with you there. Torrance says Syracuse football has not been good since the McNabb era, a few good seasons here and there. Is this beyond coaching, playing, or culture? That is a great question, Torrance, because we thought that Syracuse had come out of that, not only last year, but remember, Syracuse nearly beat Miami in 2017. They nearly beat LSU in 2017. They had pulled off an upset a season under Babers, and it appeared like they were at least turning the tide and saying that they would be a 6 or 7 win football team year in and year out, make bowl games, and at least threaten Clemson from time to time. I mean, that all happened. They beat Clemson 2 years ago. Yep, starting quarterback went down, and some of the factors that led into not only that game, but when Trevor Lawrence went down and Syracuse almost pulled off the upset last year, 2018 against Clemson. Excuse me. All these things happened, and it led you to believe they were going the right way, had the right offensive system in place, and maybe they still do. But when you have a defense that just utterly collapses like this, and the thought is it's kind of bend but don't break, your offense will always override whatever flaws your defense had. Well, what we saw last year is the hole in that plan. When you have a bad offensive line, you can't get the ball to your skill position players enough, which they started to do early in this game. It's so forgotten about now. But Jawar Jordan running the jet sweep and getting the ball to Aaron Hackett, almost had 2 touchdowns on the day. Taj Harris was targeted more today. Tristan Jackson's just a great player, had over 130 yards receiving, but they were looking in other places today. They were putting different names into the offense. It was encouraging. They started to empty the bench a little bit. And then the bottom fell out, and now you're just chucking the ball down the field the whole game just to try and get back in this thing. Let's see. Joe saying the way to beat any Syracuse team is to tell them how great they are or supposed to be. It's hard. I like Kevin, too. They need another Stephen A. Smith speech. Yeah, bring back the spirit animal of Syracuse football, right? But a lot of you are talking about not only short-term things but big-term things. You know, Syracuse football has better facilities. They're in the ACC. They're renovating the Carrier Dome, as we saw in our friend Walt the Crane, who has his own Instagram account these days. So they're addressing a lot of the things that you have to do to be better on the field. But now you're going to put up what is potentially a 3-9 season, and if it's not, it's 4-8, or they're not going 5-7 at this rate. You're putting an under 500 season on the books. I think that's a lock, right? Technically, they have 3 games to go and could finish 6-6, but who wants to place that bet right now? You get long odds on it, I'll tell you that much. But there's going to be a sub-500 season. And that means 3 of Babers' 4 seasons are sub-500. And those first 2 you got to put into context with transition and everything. But philosophically, big picture, as Torrance asked the question, why can't this thing be consistent? It's just a huge step back in so many different ways after it looked like they had turned the tide. And even if they took a step back this year, to expect another 10-win season or 9-win season, and I admittedly was right in line with that. I thought they could win 9 games again this year with what DeVito looked like to be, with the schedule that looked to be favorable on paper, with a great defense, with NFL players on it like Robinson, like Coleman, an All-American safety at Cisco, one of the best special teams units in the country. But even if they took a step back, let's say they went 7-5 based off of those expectations, you could accept that that's college football, that's an offensive line, excuse me, in transition, and that's just college football, right? You can take a step back like that. But to go from 10-3, getting people's hopes up again, getting fans to buy back in, 9,000 new season tickets and all the buildup that was there, to 3-9 like that it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning, and it's hard to get. As fast as those fans ran back, they're all fleeing back, and it's going to be a lot harder to get them to buy back in again. Fans like some of you that are in the comments and watch football week in and week out, I mean, they've got you, but it's that kind of fair weather fringe base of fans that rounds out the Carrier Dome and rounds out the attention and buzz a program gets when they're good, that they're just going to find other things to do now. And it's diehards only again sitting here pondering change, right? Let's see what else you guys are saying. Marty says Dino is overrated. John saying was frustrated to watch DeVito. He wasn't going through his progressions. He looked like he was starting to and maybe backed off a little bit, but it's hard to judge him in the second half, John, because now you're just chucking the ball down the field. Now you're down by 20 points, and whatever offensive plan you had gets thrown out the window. But that 4th down play where he kind of slid before the sticks, the fumble on the sideline, like why are you even reaching the football out there? There's still mistakes that DeVito is making that he should not be at this point of his career. Marty mentioning Campbell at ISU is better than Dino at Syracuse. Matt Campbell, a big coaching prospect out there that could get a bigger job in the college football world. Joe saying it's not just coaching, you need talent, and Syracuse, you just don't get those good players here. And that's the thing, like recruiting was already a concern. Syracuse was near the bottom of the ACC. There's no impact, wow prospects in the upcoming class of 2020. And remember, the early signing period, which is now essentially the signing period, they moved it up. This is now about a month away. You're getting there. And how much harder is this going to be to get some of those impact 4-star players? Because excuse me, pardon me for a sec. 4-star players get you more 4-star players. And that's what, when DeVito was a prospect, 4 stars, Elite 8, Elite 11 player, all the accolades that he got, right? He was recruiting other players. So other 4 stars, other highly talented players said, well, if he's going to Syracuse, I at least got to think about him, right? You're already fighting such an uphill battle to get talented players from the Northeast or wherever to come here. Now that sell becomes a little bit harder because what Dino was preaching was starting to come true. He asked for faith, and the evidence was starting to show there. They were pulling upsets, 10-3 season, back in the top 25 polls last year. That was starting to show what they were doing was working. And now what we're seeing is it has taken a giant step back. Rob saying Vegas-level costume changes the other day. Axe, thanks, Rob. We had a lot of fun with our Orange Weekly Halloween video this year. Adds BC has a great offensive line, running backs unstoppable because defensive coaches were outcoached by BC's offensive coaches. Game ended when BC held Syracuse to 3 points on the goal line in the second quarter, promising offensive effort early on. But BC adjusted to Syracuse's massively reduced playbook, which comes from a limited personnel. Does Dino need to assume play calling responsibilities? I think he does. I think he's got to be more aggressive. I think he's got to take over there. And again, offense is not the main story today because the defense just did not give them an opportunity to keep pace with Boston College. Think about this. Coming into this football game today, there had not been a lead change in a Syracuse football game. That is a remarkable stat to be going into game 9 and to not have a lead change. Well, there was 3 in the first quarter. It was a wild first quarter, which Syracuse, by the way, led at the end of the first quarter, 17-10. And then the tsunami hit, and Boston College scored 34 points in one quarter. Mathematically, that just doesn't even work out. But they scored on the first play of the second quarter and did not stop from there. Good comment as always, Rob. Tom saying fewer Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night games next year. They don't schedule blowouts. Well, that's the other thing. Syracuse got that primetime game against Clemson. They got those Friday night games, those Thursday night games. Good exposure for recruiting, right? That you're a desired entity. Next year, whole lot of noon games. Uncle Brent likes the noon games, not going to lie. Get my work done early and enjoy my Saturday night. But, when you're in prime time, that means you're a desired entity. TV wants you. Next year, minimal opportunities there for sure. Kyle says this is purely a lack of talent. DeVito horrible and the defense has given up. Our only hope is to recruit a dual-threat quarterback and recruit as hard as possible. DeVito should not be the starter next year, period. There is, I forget his name off the top of my head, there is a transfer from North Carolina that's going to be visiting Syracuse soon. We wrote about him this week. You can check it out on the Syracuse Orange Football page here on syracuse.com. Recruiting-wise, certainly, but a transfer, that would put a little more juice in the quarterback room, right? Because he can play right away and has a little bit of experience. But you got to look at everything now. Syracuse tried the transfer route. They tried the immediate plug-the-hole route with Ryan Alexander, and I saw how that worked out. He quit the team. As noted here by our friend Ben on the Syracuse Orange Football comment, it says, it's interesting, and I may write something about this later, but including the current class, Dino's recruiting hasn't been much, if any, better than Schaefer's. And that's something most people assumed would get better. We'll look out for that piece from our friend Ben Burrows about recruiting. It all comes back to recruiting, right? And numbers-wise and many other ways, now that we're 4 years in here, it does not look like it's an improvement. Cade Fortin, thank you, Ben, is the North Carolina transfer that's considering Syracuse. He's got other names on his list, but that would put a lot of juice in that quarterback room for sure. So here's the thing. as we wrap up for today. We won't be here next week because Syracuse is on a bye. I'll be here after the Duke game and the Louisville game and the Wake Forest game. Please come join me. I don't want to be lonely, but frankly, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, because this Syracuse football team is just going to fall off the map. People are going to move on to basketball. They're going to move on to other things. They might check the score, and we'll document it for you. We'll be here. That's when this job really becomes a job, when you have to watch a bad football team and kind of document what they're doing, and it is stunning. It's like a balloon just popped after what Syracuse built up to the point of the end of last year. And at 1:43 p.m. today, I know the game lasted longer than that, but it was at 1:43 p.m. when time of death was declared officially on the 2019 Syracuse football season. So I hope you come back after those few games we got coming up here. We'd love to hear from you and continue to discuss what you think needs to change and what they need to do to improve. But interest on what they do in 2019 is certainly going to wane after what we saw today. Come back Wednesday night. We'll be here doing a basketball chat after the Orange take on Virginia, late one, 9 o'clock tip time. So when that one's over, we'll be chatting live here on Facebook over on the Syracuse Orange basketball Facebook page. So make sure you give that a like if you haven't done that already. Thanks for hanging with us today. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health. Thanks to my man Ben Burrows running things behind the scenes. We will be back football-wise after the Duke game, but we will be back here on Facebook Live on Wednesday night after Syracuse takes on defending national champion Virginia, as it is officially basketball season for Syracuse fans everywhere. Thanks for hanging with us today. Have a great rest of your weekend.